Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Unlocking Master Data Management Success, Real-World Insights and Strategies. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be moderating today's event. Our featured speakers are Dan Twing, President and COO at Enterprise Management Associates, and Steven Lin, Product Marketing Manager for Semarchy. Dan joined EMA in 2005 and has over 25 years of experience in information systems, software development, and technology outsourcing. Dan focuses on all aspects of intelligent and automated management of IT. Steven is responsible for executing the go-to-market strategy for the award-winning data company Semarchy. Prior to joining Semarchy, Steven was a technology strategy consultant at Ernst & Young, advising large-scale data initiatives for global and Fortune 500 companies. And before I hand things over to today's featured speakers, I wanted the audience to know that Dan and Steven will be concluding today's presentation by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime by using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA with resources from today's event. So I hope you'll check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, Dan Twing. Dan?
Thanks, Raleigh. Well, today we're going to cover a survey that Steven and I worked on earlier this year and talk about some of the data points that we learned around the state of the MDM market. We'll tell you a little bit about who took the survey, and we're going to focus a lot on their intended goals for their MDM, the challenges that they faced, the benefits that they got out of it, and their lessons learned from the project. So let's start with, where is MDM or Master Data Management at today? This was a question we asked near the end of the survey. Really, was the effort invested in implementing and operating your MDM has been worthwhile? And we got 98% who agreed or strongly agreed. And you can see the strongly agree was 65%, 33% on the agree. Pretty much everybody who's done this has found value in it. So we thought we would start right there with certainly this is a worthwhile effort for most folks who go down this path. When we looked at how long folks have been running their master data management softwares, you can see that it runs from less than a year all the way out to 10 years. The average for this group of survey takers was in the 4-year range, and most of them have been running 3 to 5 years. We also asked which products they're using. You can see that there was a number of SAP products, IBM, Informatica. Not a surprise to see those at the top of the list, but quite a mix across the market. And one thing that was interesting to me is we saw that clearly we have more responses here than we had people taking the survey. We had 102 folks taking it. So on average, they're using about 2.24 products. And I went back and kind of charted that data. You can see that 41% of them were using just a single product. 27% have 2, 12% have 3, another 12% have 4, and so on. And it was interesting to understand, how in a large organization, you may have multiple of these products in use. Here, I'm combining data from 2 questions where it really kind of, for me, put the picture together of where the market is generally in terms of adoption. So we had about 4% of the respondents who have no plans. Here you'll see our sample size is a bit bigger. Those who had no plans and those who failed were not continued through the rest of the survey. But we have a handful of organizations who have no plans to do it. We have about 3% who are looking at a 12 to 24-month horizon, another 16% planning in the next 6 to 11 months, so within a year. And then you can see that same timeline of those that were, 3 to 5 years still the high point. But kind of gives a nice perspective on how this market has changed. And there's still a number of organizations actively planning. Might be their second one, might be their first one. Looking at just the respondents to the survey real quick, we'll give you just a quick look. We were talking mostly to IT directors, IT execs, IT managers, chief data officers. We had about 7% of those in here. Handful of business execs, about 3%, few application owners. So again, more directly connected to the business app. And 5% were in that integration architect category. Companies really ranged all sizes. The biggest number in that 1,000 to 2,500 range of employees, but plenty up there in the 10 to 20,000 and over 20,000 as well. You know, revenues, for the most part, you know, we're talking to organizations that were 100 million or more. There's about 35% that were under 100 million. And really, we represent all industries here, heavy on banking, finance, insurance at 27%, retail, healthcare, but a lot of industries represented. So a good mix of folks, I think, that are involved in these kinds of projects. As we look at the goals that they had for their project, we asked, what are the primary goals and objectives your organization hoped to achieve from an MDM? Here, they could select 3, and we're seeing all of the responses. Each respondent could only pick 3, and you can see what floated right up to the top, significantly higher than all the other potential responses, is improved data quality. Data integration being the second goal, really setting themselves up for data-driven innovation. You know, those round out the top 3. Steven, what do you see when you talk to clients? Is this kind of match what you're hearing in the market and what folks that are looking at your solution are hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, it does. And I think sometimes it does depend on who is trying to drive these initiatives. If it's from a business perspective, I think some of these maybe more business-centric goals like customer experiences might float to the top. But since a lot of the prospects here might be more data or IT personas, right? I think the data quality is important. And I think it is important for those personas to elevate why it is important to have data quality to the business users, right? Because that does improve better customer experiences in some of these more business or kind of global goals. So data quality does make a lot of sense, right? They're spending, I think, most estimates about 80% of their time doing data quality work that's super manual or not aligned with what the business needs for data quality, what they mean by doing that. So that makes a lot of sense. Integration, innovation. I think the integration is an interesting one. We can extrapolate that for like what needs to be in sync, right? To get it in the latest application. So then when I'm a business user and I want to improve a customer experience, it's always up to date, those kind of things. So I think those, it checks out, especially from the personas, but really maybe helping them understand to the business that these foundational needs do improve some of these other business metrics, which I think we go a little bit into later in the
Sure.
Yeah.
So, you know, we had the one question on the goals. We spent a lot of time talking to them about the challenges of getting there. The first question we asked was, what were the most significant challenges your organization encountered during the implementation process? Here again, they could each pick 3. We're showing all of the results. Data quality right up at top again, and data migration along with it. I'm sure those are highly related. And performance become a concern. So those were their top 3 challenges. Some of the others you can see: data mapping and transformation, security and compliance. So, you know, the data source complexity, some of those integration challenges, probably quite common. Steven, why don't you share what you see on this chart and how that matches the accounts you talk to?
Yeah, I think it makes sense that data quality is a persistent issue. Data migration and performance, I think those are interesting points to go back to, especially in this beginning of the survey, we found out that many customers probably have more than one master data management implementation. And a lot of times that's because they might have legacy needs or they need to move to the cloud. So the migration piece makes a lot of sense. And sometimes it is easier just to run these in parallel until there's basically no more support for the legacy one, or there is a requirement to migrate, but migration it's a whole almost effort, right? That is related to master data management, but is a big piece of the challenge of where do I place this? And then obviously the performance piece comes with it. Some systems might not work together well enough, and having to optimize what is truly needed versus trying to put everything and anything you can into a single sort of system. So I think these make sense. We hear these a lot in there. So
Sure. And then, you as you look down the list, it depends a lot on the organization and where they're at in
Yep.
their maturity, their processes. So, you see data culture readiness for 17%, that made their top 3. I mean, if you're not ready, you could see where that would trip you up. And I think as we talk about how they overcame some of these challenges a little bit later,
Yep.
that readiness, I think, comes out as well. So, just because it didn't make the top for every organization, everyone's starting from a different place, and that one kind of jumped out at me. We also
Definitely.
took a look at this data from we asked folks, have you implemented one, and how long have you been running it, and did it take multiple attempts? And you can see here that it was about 30%, I think, that struggled with that multiple attempts, and the rest got it on the first go. And it was interesting to look at some of the differences and challenges. So here, it's the same question, what were your challenges during implementation? But this one is sorted by the highest challenges for those that took multiple attempts, which are the green bar. So data mapping and transformation is the top of their list, whereas for everybody, it was data quality. You can still see that those that got the blue bar, that is at 34%. It's 7 or 8 items down the list there, but that was the highest overall from the last chart we looked at. But when we put these in the order of those requiring multiple attempts, you see that the data mapping and transformation was a big struggle for them. The complexity of the vendor solution was a big issue. Data migration was their 3rd highest, even though it was less mentioned than by the broader group. And data source complexity, I'm sure, it gets in the mix there of trying to do all the mapping and transformation. Steven, I don't know, what thoughts do you have on this, that those that took multiple tries seem to struggle in some different areas?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot of unlearning and undoing, especially for the multiple attempts, depending on what vendor they worked with from a software and implementation perspective. They might have taken maybe an approach that was too big bang, right? And they're like, you have to do everything under the sun or it's not going to work. Versus let's take small measures that work with one domain, one use case, learn from that and grow. So I believe a lot of the complexity and frustrations with the multiple attempts for the mapping and transformation is just the undoing, right? Because they didn't have the alignment going forward to actually do it right. They just maybe relied on a generic definition of an entity that they wanted to master, and they're like, okay, that should work. But then once they start using it, they realize it doesn't meet any of our needs because we are unique in our own ways. We have stuff that works for us or doesn't work for us, and we have to spend all this time now undoing all of it and then realigning and remapping to what they had. And then sometimes implementation partners come and go, right? So they might just be there for a project, but there's no carryover for learning. So I think those are probably the biggest challenges that we see too. And they're like, okay, so how can we unlearn all this and start from a position where we can have a manageable project, show these results, and actually have alignment and choose a vendor from a software and implementation perspective that really understands what we need today, get it going, and not be too complex and have training, right, and adoption across our organization. So this definitely makes a lot of sense, and especially from the data and what we hear for our clients.
Sure. And then we also asked them, what challenges did you have after implementation? Then now we see data security up at the top. Data quality, assuring data quality is right there with it. I mean, the two biggest mentions, and again, each respondent could name three. The top three are that data volume and scalability. So we continue to see data quality and performance or scalability near the top, but post implementation, we start to see concerns for data security as well.
Yeah, and honestly, that might just be the realization that, wow, we have a lot more maybe shadow IT going on, or more systems that were ungoverned and came into our system, and now we have to actually secure them through governance measures that are broader, that might have gone under the radar. So that is something uncommon, right? Uncovering and discovering additional things that we didn't realize we had in the system. And when you add more people to manage these workflows, securities and policies obviously become a broader concern. Data quality, I think that's still always going to be an issue, and that's not always completely going to be solved by any solution, but some alignment between business process, how to use it, scalability, same thing. I think if you don't plan ahead and just plan for a time in a blueprint for a specific time without thinking about the flexibility and scalability, I think those are big things that we also hear from our clients too. So these do make sense. But I think some of it is uncovering post implementation sometimes of what we sort of missed in the first round.
Right. Well, and then too, if you come just down, to the fourth and fifth rankings, there's several ties there, but user adoption is up there near the top, along with data migration. So, on post implementation, all of a sudden now I'm concerned with adoption, right? What's interesting is when we get into some of the lessons learned later, there are, adoption is not something you want to start thinking about at this stage of the project. And those that were successful will say that to us a bit later in the data, but it is interesting that one rises to the top. And then too, you end up with, we still, data integration complexity is tied there in fifth place with legacy systems integration. So integration challenges continue, they're probably rolling it out. And, related to the data security is the data privacy and compliance concerns. So kind of, you can see their focus shifting a bit now that they've got some parts of it running, and now the concerns change a bit. And we also took that same look between those who got it right on the first go and those who took multiple tries. Right at the top, though, data security is still the top concern. It was a big challenge for them. But what's interesting is user adoption is now number two for that group of folks.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. And user adoption, right? That's really a kind of cultural or business thing that it's a learned thing. Whether sometimes the multiple attempts might just be their hope that a new system or a new application will completely solve all the adoption issues without saying, hey, maybe we didn't learn from last time, and bring in the right stakeholders to sort of talk through more specifically their requirements, how they're going to use it, identifying some champions even, right? To say, okay, this is how we're going to move going forward. So yeah, I think it makes sense. And even, right, like for those who implement first time, it's still a big challenge. But what we see is, tying the hope to a technology to solve the human aspects of it is going to be really challenging. Some of those, you just have to talk up front and understand, okay, other people are struggling from this. We probably had our own experiences struggling for user adoption. It is something we should consider on the forefront, and obviously not let security bite us after these implementations, but think about some of these really critical concerns up front and increase the success rate, whether it's your first time or your second time doing it.
Right. Yeah, well, and the second time around, you certainly have awareness of some of the things that you can focus more on, and the adoption seems to be one that was a concern for them. When we switch to asking more about benefits, we asked straight up, what benefits have you observed as a result of implementing your MDM? As much as the challenges, both pre and post implementation, revolved around data quality concerns, that is the top benefit that they got out of the project was, it was, I think, the key thing that most were hoping to get, and for the most part, they got it. The data quality, makes the top of that list. Improved reporting and analytics is their number 2 here. Faster decision making, cost reduction. I mean, these are all great outcomes. That competitive advantage, business outcome like that is that high on that list. I find, very encouraging. So, we go back to that first data point, 98% said, yeah, we did get value out of this. You can see exactly where that value here is on this chart. Does this line up with what your folks are achieving? Your active users?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, so the data quality, right? Like, obviously, it's a good sign that, like, if this is the main challenge, then this is the main benefit that we're receiving. And obviously, data quality sometimes might look different to different clients. Sometimes it is just reducing the hours to actually manage it. Sometimes it's actually better quality of data that they can use for decision making and stuff like that. So so it's really hopeful that this stuff is working in the right direction, but even more so that there are these business things that maybe sometimes the technical personas might not be helping themselves as much to maybe increase budget to do this, carry this across the organization, right? Because cost reduction hits the bottom line. Competitive advantage can hit the bottom line. Those kind of things, I think, are helpful for them to know that, hey, like, your peers are seeing these things. Maybe these are things that we should build on in our business case and tell the other stakeholders that we're not just seeing these operational efficiencies that might be hard to quantify, but there's actual maybe bottom line impacts to some of these business goals. So we see that often too, is communicating and quantifying these benefits that actually impact the bottom line, and not just these softer measures, I guess, of the benefits.
Well, I think if you feel like you're improving the data quality, I think that is directly related to faster decision making, because if you don't trust the data, you're going to cross-check things. You're going to spend time not trusting the data. As you learn to trust the data, and if you feel like you got better reporting and analytics coming out, those top 2 things feed right into faster decision making, because I learned to trust what's in front of me, right? I have trust in the system now. I can then trust that I can make those decisions. So, and then you start to see the other benefits come about, because if you're actually decisioning faster, of course, you're going to see some cost reductions. You're going to start to gain some competitive advantages. So to me, these products are actually, really helping these accounts. So we did also take that multiple versus first go view of this. Improved data quality as a benefit, even for those who struggled and had to take multiple tries at getting an MDM up and running. They had even better results with data quality. You can see 61% said better or improved data quality, and faster decision making was actually number 2 for this group. So it's great to see that even the ones who struggled more, took multiple tries, they persevered and they got to the promised land of those very benefits.
This definitely checks out for what we're seeing too. Definitely the faster decision making piece of it. I think, like you're saying, there are the ties to data quality, which trickles down to all these other benefits that they're seeing, and especially if it's your second time, and if it's the same team, typically that's like doing this, they're probably a lot more aware of some of these things that they need to have a tighter watch on. So the data quality makes sense, how they improve. So no, this makes complete sense to what we're seeing, and especially good that they're seeing some of these like other business stuff, like the cost reduction, those kind of things, competitive advantage. So not just going back to the baseline, but how do we sort of maybe leapfrog what we learned and say, okay, now we have other things that we can add on and learn on top of what we might have missed the first time. So I think that's maybe a good learning if this is your second time around, or
Yep.
maybe your first one didn't go so well, that you don't necessarily have to restart and try to get a baseline, but maybe there's restart plus a leapfrog they can add and get even more advantages out of this implementation.
Absolutely. So we then asked, which metrics do you use to track and measure the impact of your MDM? Here again, they were allowed to make 3 choices. We're looking at the whole data set, and data quality again right at the top. 48% said that that was one of the key metrics that they used, and data accuracy and data security and revenue growth, ROI. Those things, are also way up high on the list. Data integration as well. So, those seem to be the primary metrics, which is probably why they can tell us the data quality benefit was there for them in the previous question, because most of them have put metrics in place to measure that discreetly and see their progress, which I think is key to feeling like, again, if you're going to trust the data, you got to have a way to measure the progress. Don't you agree, Steven?
Yeah, definitely agree. I think this checks out with a lot of times what we talk to with clients and what they're hoping to get out of it. Data quality, these metrics make sense. Now, obviously, you and I both know, I think there's like depth to the data quality, right? Like how that's built out. Maybe that's like how complete it is, what's the time to access it, those kind of things. So there's definitely some extrapolation sometimes, but yeah, data quality is often rolled up into these things. But yeah, I think the other interesting things are like the maybe non-data related things, like the revenue growth, ROI, those kind of more business metrics. I think there's a harder time to maybe roll up, like how does data quality actually help improve the revenue growth or those kind of business metrics. But it's good to see, it's good to see that this kind of survey data matches up with what we're seeing are most important to measure for our clients. So,
and then again, looking at that through the lens of who took multiple tries and who got it right on the first try. Not as many deltas here at the top. I mean, they're right in line on data quality. Was a bit of a surprise to me to see that those that took multiple attempts, maybe they just had a very low expectation on a return on investment. But that's the biggest thing that jumps off the page to me, is that those who struggled, though, when they got to the end, they were surprised by the ROI they got out of the project. Maybe it's just because it was a tough journey that, you kind of look back and go, wow, it was worth it. I don't know, but that's a big delta there between those two groups, and data accuracy as well. I don't know that they had anticipated achieving that. So interesting to see that through that same lens of who struggled and who didn't. And we do the same thing here. We asked, what have been the results for your key metrics? And on the left side of the screen is just the whole survey together. And you can see that 94% reported some or significant improvements to their metrics. And when you look at those who took multiple attempts and who got it right in the first go, you'll see that they had some improvement. There's a lot more of the green bar in that category. Again, I'm sure the scars from the project, you got through it, it's running, and we're actually starting to see the benefit. But maybe not quite to the same enthusiasm as the group that just got through in one go. But I think, here's another example that just says this has been valuable for us, right?
Yep. And 40% for multiple attempts that have significant improvements. That's still a sizable number, right? It's not,
absolutely.
a small. So I mean, I think you're right. There's some expectation setting there of, okay, maybe let's right size of what we expected from the first time. But it's good to see that, like, if maybe done some of these right, understood the challenges, measuring the right things, putting in the right goals, starting off the right foot, you might have a much better outcome than you probably initially expected in the first time around.
So let's get into the lessons learned. They, we really wanted to understand what they would do differently. So relating to that first question on the challenges that you had to overcome, we asked them, how did you overcome these challenges? This was an open-ended question. And then, as we evaluated that data, we sort of just categorized it, made it, the results look like it had been a multiple choice question. So looking at all of those comments, 17 of the folks, focused on vendor support as the key way to overcome those early challenges during the implementation. Another big group, 16 of them said, now remember, we had 103 in here in total. 16 of them said, just give it time. I mean, no real insight other than, you just got to keep after it. You can imagine some of those integration issues, some of those data quality issues. You just have to work through it, I think. And then outside help was the other big category here, bringing in contractors and whatnot, communication across the teams, task forces, planning kind of round out the top. There was a lot of passion in the comments around training. We only had 5 responses there, but I'll tell you, they were very adamant about, proper training up front. And I think that relates too to the vendor support, right? If you don't know the product well, you have to lean on the vendor more. So, we give you just a little insight. Here's just a handful of the comments that I chose to highlight. You can look at those for yourself. Steven, what do you hear from the field when you hear people struggling? What kinds of things do they do to overcome that? And if vendor support's on the top of this list, I'd be surprised if you guys don't see a lot of just requests for help along the way.
Yeah, there's definitely a request for help, but more specifically on the help is, do they really understand what I need, right? A lot of times vendors might just say, hey, like, we've seen all these use cases, so you look like this other use case, right? And but without knowing that, there are very specific requirements sometimes, not because they want to, but that's just how the business has been built up. And it is difficult just to say, change everything. And then if you do it our way, it'll work, which is oftentimes, Dan, as you probably know from your experience, not realistic, right? There's a expectation to work with what's running, but sort of have these new innovations and new things go on at the same time. So I think really understanding the complexity of the needs is a big one to sort of address and say, okay, you've done this, but can you understand it in my context, my environment, my business, without damaging anything that's business as usual for today. There's other, and that includes like, okay, I have problems today, but I also have dreams and goals tomorrow. So is it flexible enough that I can configure, make changes fast enough in the future if I wanted to, without basically breaking or hoping that I don't have to expand my cost 10x, right? To do the same thing. So I think those sort of things are helpful. And then the last piece is, we oftentimes hear a lot of pressure to do this fast and be able to see results, basically within a quarter or 2 quarters, basically under a year, right? And if anything takes longer than that, as you know, with these enterprise implementations, that's often the case. So anything that can get them to proving that value and getting something to show and people using it within a quarter, with all these complex business requirements, I think that's really what they mean by vendor support and how we help them see the value. Right.
Well, and we asked them which strategies were most effective in promoting adoption, because we heard adoption was a challenge, right? Earlier. And, I actually found this kind of interesting, that define key performance indicators was a key to adoption. But I think, as we were talking earlier, that showing progress and movement on data accuracy and data quality and helps people understand that they can trust this and make those decisions based on that data. So, I suppose having a way to show how things improved is key to getting folks to trust the new environment. And
Yeah,
then of course, select an MDM with a user-friendly interface, helped with adoption, securing executive support. So often the people, the tech is good, the people are, the attitudes and the culture is as much a challenge as anything.
yeah,
So
no, this all makes
yeah, I
sense.
think this lines up with what we would expect. And then which key lessons or best practices has your organization learned from its journey? So kind of that, overall looking back, not how did you overcome the challenges, but what did you learn at the end? And again, data quality metrics are key. I think, both focusing on that data quality and then giving people a way to mark the benchmark, as you said earlier, Steven, and track the progress. And that data quality is ongoing. It doesn't end with the project. I mean, I thought those two on top made a lot of sense here. And then
Yeah,
the third ranking is, your vendor selection is critical. So it stays with the themes of what we've been talking about. Any surprises for you on this chart?
no, I don't think anything completely surprising. It is interesting that data quality is that important that it takes the top 2 or 3 spots. But yeah, I think the saying is what gets measured gets improved. So yeah, these aligning them to measure the progress, because a lot of times, I know the misalignment sometimes between business and IT is, hey, this isn't working, but we never define like what does working mean, right? And if working is it takes me 2 minutes now to get all the right data versus an hour, that's working and that's improvement. So this stuff definitely makes sense. And especially for data quality as an ongoing effort, especially the master data management, hopefully your business has dream to grow and add new projects and add new innovation, new technology. So yeah, all this stuff will fall in, but as long as you have something in place to sort of help make that adoption easier and growing easier, I think that's the right expectation there. And I think that goes on with any technology, right? But
Absolutely.
the ongoing piece is important. And yeah, the vendor, right? Selfishly, right? The vendor selection makes sense to us, but yeah, who you work with, like who you partner with, is really important, because they're just there for day one after the invoice is signed, and not the rest of the time you're growing and having these visions. And that might add to the frustrations of not being able to grow as fast or in the direction that you want to. So these definitely don't.
And I'm not surprised to see user training is crucial being on this list either. I would imagine that's another place where the right vendor can make the difference, both in terms of how easy is the product to use, but how
Definitely.
good is the training materials, and and the self-help, so folks can get their skill level up quickly on the product.
Yep.
And we also looked at that through this same lens, and one of the more interesting outcomes of this is, again, data quality makes the top of the list, and it's even more pronounced for those who had to struggle a bit with getting this done. But selecting the right vendor floats to number 2 here. And I think the key here is that for a lot of folks that didn't get it right on the first go, it seems that vendor may have been a big part of their challenges.
Yeah. No, I think we talked about this already. But yeah, the first time you get burned, there's probably a lot of lessons to be learned there, and like what are the limitations of the vendors and how they help me grow. So all this makes perfect sense in terms of the data that is getting there.
And then here again, we asked another open-ended question, which is, if you were to start the MDM implementation process again, what would you do differently? And again, this data is just a sort of a summary of categorizing the comments. 26 out of the 103 would do nothing different. I mean, wouldn't you love to get to the end of a project of this magnitude and feel that way? So, well, right around 24%, they would just do what they did and it was successful for them, or 25%. The number 2, what I would do differently is vendor selection. So You got to assume that maybe that first group, part of why they would do nothing different is they had a good selection process and they made a good choice with their vendor, and others didn't. And then you see training and communication, very common project management challenges, more focus on data qualities near the top. That makes sense as well. And again, outside help, those who there is a number of the comments. They were very passionate about that. Many organizations that struggled found that bringing in some expertise was helpful. So you can either get that from the vendor, or you can get that from other sources, but for many organizations, that was a key part of it.
Yep.
And here again, you're welcome to look at these. We're not going to read through them, but just pulled out some of the more poignant comments. And while that's up on the screen, Steven, if you have any other things you would share about the folks, or if not, we'll move on.
Yeah, no, I don't have too much to share, but I think what we hear from customers, especially if it's the second go around, they'll tell you exactly what went wrong. They have a very detailed a log of what what they don't want to see. So I think that's the good thing about experience is you get a better understanding of what I can't do or shouldn't do again. And so it definitely makes sense, and why they're so a lot more focused, right, on the vendor selection go around.
So just, to kind of summarize the data that we've just looked at, most folks are finding value. Data quality, migration, performance optimization tend to be the big challenges during implementation. Data security, quality assurance of the data, and scalability post implementation are the big worries. Overcoming challenges, the big three were vendor support, give it time, and outside help. And again, I think that related to vendor support and outside help are, both forms of outside help. So to think that, these things just take time and you need expert help to get through it. And then, that the idea that what they would do differently, again, vendor selection, training, communication, and planning. I mean, some of this is, you could say about any technology. It doesn't have to be MDM. You need to pick a product that will integrate well in your environment, someone you can work with who's going to help you through it. And you got to get your people trained on it. And then, you got to have good project management and communication through the process. Any IT project could have a similar list here.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. Yeah, I think this is a good wrap up of, like you're saying, it's good to see that, MDM is not completely different than any other major, maybe enterprise effort that you're trying to do. So there's probably some learnings that you can take from those initiatives, right? So you don't have to completely do it all over, but there might be, like you're saying, some specific things like data quality, security that you might want to have maybe a little bit more focus on, because now there's a lot more touch points. And like, again, the vendor, and maybe a better word is like partners, right? Because a lot of times it's not just the software vendors, but who's helping you implement, and they should be there for the long term and really understand what you're doing and have some experience there. So all this makes sense, and keeping your people communicated, on board, adopted. So it's not another shelfware product, right? In 5 years, in a year.
Right.
Yeah.
And then this was my favorite slide as we were kicking around the data. It takes the data from two different questions. That one of those early questions we talked about, what are your desired benefits? What are you trying to get? And then the achieved benefits. And I just found this really encouraging, because if you look, the blue bars are what they hoped to get out of the project, and the green bars are what they felt they actually got. So improved data quality, again, it was the highest number. It was 51% hope for that benefit. 54% actually got that benefit. But what really jumps off the page for me is faster decision-making, ROI and cost reduction, and competitive advantage. All of those had relatively low expectations as a benefit, 20% or less. And yet almost 40% found they got faster decision-making, and 35% got ROI and cost reduction. So, this is a class of software that is worth the effort. I think is
it'd be
what my
interesting.
takeaway from this is. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think it'd be interesting to see how this, master data management might compare into like other enterprise software, and if it's the same but vein. But yeah, I think we do hear that a lot from our clients. Yeah, and I think that maybe the sort of action is, if you've already implemented this or if you haven't, it's to make sure that these things are something that you put in your brag sheet, right? As you come out and say, hey, like this is actually working and everyone is really liking the results. Can we do more with this? So I think, yeah, it really shows good promise for this stuff here, and maybe increase some expectations for what this can deliver.
Certainly. Well, I want to give you a chance, Steven, to highlight Semarchy's views. So why don't you tell us what you got here?
Yeah, definitely. So just a little about us, right? So we have quite a bit of experience with the master data management process, sort of journey. About 300 clients all over the world, different sort of use cases. So back to the point of, how do we understand your needs, to your complexity, to your specific requirements, right? We have some experience there. One of the differentiators, I think, for us is we can move pretty fast and help you prove that value and make sure that you're measuring those improvements that you're wanting to do, whether it's from like data quality perspective, et cetera. So about 80% of our clients typically can have something that they can show and prove that's working in about a quarter. And I think it's probably one big pats on the back is, as you've seen in the survey, vendor support and being a partner right across your journey is extremely important. I think we're probably one of the highest rated vendors in the last 12 months about recommendation, support rating. So I think these are key things as you're looking to evaluate and see how you should start your journey. And we can help you basically from end to end, right? Whether it's from the beginning of building a business case, so you can read these case studies, do an ROI calculator, which I run, evaluating vendors. We have some selection guides that are completely independent that you can see, okay, what do I need to stand up, try it for yourself if you want to. And then during the implementation and post-implementation, we have blueprints that you can use to follow how can I get the most success for my solution, and obviously having the customer support that's world-class after you implement the solution and want to grow. So that's a little bit of the pitch. And then I guess, Dan, we should open the floor to any questions.
Yeah. So Raleigh, we're going to turn it back to you to field some questions for us. We're happy to take some Q&A from the audience.
Sounds good. Steven, starting with you, can you share what to look for in an MDM vendor and their solutions?
Yeah, I think combination of what we hear from our clients and the survey, right? I think biggest thing is ease of use and adoption, right? Can I actually understand this, and how can it fit into my complex environment without changing too much overhaul, right? I know that's a lot of times a big challenge for our clients. Other vendors might say, hey, you should fit your entire data ecosystem environment into what we think would work, versus build something that works with what's existing and then grow along the way. So the flexibility and speed to deploy, I think, is a big thing that we see in our vendor selection process, whether it's the first time or second time or multiple times, right, doing this.
Thank you for those insights, Steven. Jumping over to you, Dan, why do you think that defining KPIs was most important to user adoption?
Well, I think if I just think about myself in one of those roles, right? You go through this process, it's changed, depends on who you are in the organization. But if you're someone who's dependent on that data to make business decisions, and you're being asked to be more data driven, but your data is being manipulated and moved around, and you got to trust it. So I think that maybe the KPIs just help people understand first a baseline, right? I'll tell you, the handful of times that that I've really dug in on, say, our CRM data, for example, at our company. You know, you think everything is great, and if you look hard enough, you will find incomplete data all over the place, and you will find outdated data. And if you're not proactively on top of that, you might not even understand that starting baseline. So I think the KPIs help by first giving you a baseline of where you are, and then showing progressive improvement. It gets everyone excited about the project, it gets them on board, and it gets them trusting the data. So I think, it's like a scorecard, and you don't know if you're winning without those metrics. So therefore, you don't know as a user if it's worth the training time and changing your processes. When you see the KPIs improve, then you learn to trust it, and and then you become an avid user, because all of a sudden it becomes indispensable throughout your day.
Yep.
Great insights. Thank you. Steven, how does AI play into the role of MDM?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, right, with AI and machine learning, right, data quality, as you can imagine, and security and trust, right, are a huge important factor. And I think sometimes when these new technologies come up, people try to put the cart before the horse, and not understanding that what's bad coming in is probably going to be bad coming out. So I think master data management plays a crucial role, right? Sort of on the left-hand side of AI. Can I fully understand and trust all the data that I have that's good quality, and then use it to, train more specific models, and use it in a way that's actually a competitive advantage for me, because I have this wealth of data or this wealth of knowledge that's useful for my use case, and not just maybe a generic use case from outside the industry. So I think it plays a really important role, but maybe in the way where it sets a foundation for AI and not the other way around, right? I think there's still probably a lot of potential, maybe aversion to having AI completely run your most important data assets. But if you do it the other way around and choose and govern what gets trained and trust the quality and have everything in one place, I think that's probably the better way to go. And what we're seeing our clients moving towards is setting the foundation for AI with master data management.
Thank you for clarifying that. And a topic that's top of mind for many people is getting executive buy-in. Specifically, this question asks, how do I get more executive sponsorship and budget for MDM?
Yeah, I think that's where it makes sense to have these business cases and these surveys, right? Because a lot of times when we talk to our clients, they are like, it's a gut feel. Maybe it's not a gut feeling, but they're like, from experience, we know that generally investing in data quality or improving data management is going to help. But that's hard to quantify and convince maybe procurement or finance to say, yeah, I'll fork over X amount of money so you can do that based on a gut instinct. So I think the biggest thing is a lot of times executive sponsors and support, they want to see numbers, or they want to see proof of other examples that's worked. And sometimes it's hard to find this stuff, right? It took us a couple months to even get this data. We have a lot of experience, and sometimes it's even hard to get that through with the client of what are your goals, right? How do we measure what is important to you? And that's where, like I'm saying, the surveys, the studies that we're doing, Dan, and the calculators and business case building opportunities that you have with Semarchy, we can help you sort of quantify these things that's more tailored to your goals, and then get the executives sponsorship that you need to actually move it forward and that's the use case, right? So I think that's probably the best answer to that question.
Yeah, I would just add to that, if an organization wants people to be more data driven in their decision making, so if you start with the premise that data-based decisions are better decisions if you have good data, then you look at this survey data and you say, everybody had better data after they did this than before. And the expectations around ROI, around competitive advantage, all those business outcomes were exceeded. They weren't just met, but they were exceeded by a factor of almost 2 who thought they would have those benefits and who actually got them. So to me, I'd be making the argument like that. You want better decisions. They need to be data-based. You want people to move more quickly. They have to trust the data. This is how you get there. And I think there's a real case to be made here for, persuading the executives to support such a project, because it fits right in with those strategic objectives, but it gives you some of the tactical things that you need for staff to just behave the way that you want them to change their behavior, right? You want them to be based on data, make it easier for them to get data they can trust.
Yep.
Thank you both for those insights. Let's take one final question. Dan, I'll start with you, and Steven, if you have anything to add, feel free. And the question is, what was the biggest surprise in the survey data?
I think for me, the 2 things that jump out the most were how important vendor selection is in this category of software. I mean, I think it can be in every category, but the data integration issues, having a vendor who's just been there with a block of clients that, I mean, Steven, you said you guys have well over 300 clients. I mean, you go through 300 accounts, you see a lot of stuff that helps the next implementation. So, I think vendor selection, because of how it has to plug in, was a bit of a surprise for me. And then too, that the ROI is there. I mean, and stronger than most people expected it to be. So those were the 2 things that surprised me.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with like the ROI piece. I think a lot of times when projects come in, the expectation is super low of I don't think this thing's just going to make money. It's just going to be a run, or we just need it. But it's good to see that there are actual benefits that they didn't expect to see. So I think that's definitely a big surprise. I think the other one, just from a maybe semantic perspective, right? Single truth is single source of truth, I think oftentimes get tied in with master data management. So I think it's really interesting that kind of fell a lot lower than the importance of data quality. But I think that's just kind of a more, I think, fun one. But definitely the ROI one is really intriguing. But I think as there's more data, like you're saying, showing that people are actually seeing much better results than they're anticipating, I think that one's a good one. And if they're measuring correctly, kind of like you're saying, that might ring true, right, for them. If they say, hey, these are the expectations, we should probably do it based on the data, and let's measure it correctly and see if we do get a lot more benefits than we desired. So,
right. Well, yeah, only 7% said they were after single source of truth, right? That was, we laughed about that because that's a go-to in the marketing lingo, and yet not something everyone was chasing. Exactly. And yet still more than twice as many actually found value in that than they expected to. And there's value in that, but it's not the top thing they're hoping to get, right? So
no, definitely. Cool.
Thank you, Dan and Steven, for all your insights today. And I wanted to thank our audience for joining us. As I mentioned, I will be sending out a follow-up email with resources from today's event. So be sure to check that email out. And I hope we'll see you at a future EMA research webinar. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.